Good evening. We're going to go ahead and call to order the workshop session of governing body of the city of Lampasas. First item on our workshop agenda this evening is discussion and presentation by Jason Jones from Jones Heroy Consulting Engineer regarding pre-treatment study and recommendations.
All right, Mayor, Council, thank you for having me here today. Is that all right if I take this off while I talk? I'm hard enough to hear as it is, so that would help.
Just want to be sure that you speak into the microphone so that those who are watching from home can hear you.
All right, is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. All right, thank you. My name is Jason Jones with Jones Heroy and Associates, and this is trying to talk to you about 20 or 30 minutes on the highlights of a report that we submitted to the city in last month that I think most of you got a copy of already. And it's the Ajinomoto Windsor pretreatment facility, and we've also rolled in an analysis of your main wastewater plant solids handling facilities into this study. This study was actually born out of discussions with Gary Cox and staff that started in 2018 there in City Hall, and recognizing that the pretreatment facility that is constructed for Ajinomoto Windsor was built in the 90s and really hasn't been touched since then, and the fact that their flows have substantially increased since then, the city recognized the need for us to take a closer look at things and the impacts on the city's facilities and your capacities. And that's really what our purpose here, and ultimately what the purpose of our mission is to protect water quality in Sulphur Creek. Because as you know, that water goes down the creek, it's the Lampasas River, and you pump it back and it's your drinking water source, combined with the flows of the Lampasas River from Lakes to House Hollow. So the city has a vested interest here to protect its citizens and the water quality in Sulphur Creek. And the plant has been doing that successfully for the last 20, 25 years, I'll say. There has been no issue there from what I'm seeing on the water quality so far. So I'm going to make sure I can get this thing to work, Becky. And we're just going to go through some more overview of the existing conditions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the sources of data that we use for our analysis and our design parameters and our recommendations for sizing the facilities that are required to pre-treat these flows from Ajinomoto Windsor. And we're going to talk about the actual improvements and construction cost estimates and some things that we can do in the short term between now and some hard decisions that need to be made, I believe. This is just an aerial overview of the site. Most of you on council, I'm sure you're familiar with what we're talking about here. The Ajinomoto Windsor plant's there on 3rd Street, right down the road. The city's wastewater plant, not too far away. And Sulphur Creek, they're running between us and 4th Street here. We're just north of 4th Street is the yellow line in this aerial photograph. A little close-up view of the city's wastewater plant site. It's a big site. I don't even have all the land on this aerial photograph because the electrical facilities and I think the dog pound there is cut off of the aerial photograph. But up in the north, top right-hand corner here is one of the original wastewater plants of the city. It's since been decommissioned. And then right there in the middle is the city's, what we're calling the main wastewater treatment plant. This is otherwise known as the Henderson 1.5 million gallon per day wastewater plant that was built in the 90s, concurrent with when the Ajinomoto Windsor pretreatment facility was built in the 90s. Those two were both built about the same time. About 1998, I believe, is when they came online. And in the center there is a sludge holding and belt press, albeit it's not as talked about, because what we're really interested in is the clean water going in the creek. We have to remove the solids from that water, and this is a very important part of the operations here in the center. That I call it a bullseye unit. There next to that arrow is an old wastewater plant that was converted to some sludge holding, solids holding, and in that metal building there is what we call a belt press. It squeezes the water out of the solids so that they can be hauled off more cost effectively from the site. I believe that's hauled off to a landfill currently. Sometimes it's land applied. This is just a close-up of the Ajinomoto Windsor plant site. It takes up that entire block there, just north of 3rd Street. We got a tour of this facility in March of 2020 with city staff, got to walk through it, and they kind of showed us where their process flows enter the city's wastewater system. There's actually 4 different locations where they do enter, 2 of which have grease traps that the flows go through before they hit the city system. 2 of these don't have grease traps. I think the more important flows do have grease traps on them, and they're cleaned, I believe, on a bi-weekly schedule. And then that's all owned and operated by Ajinomoto Windsor, and at the point of demarcation is right there where I've got the arrow where it flows into the city's wastewater plant. It's got a dedicated 10-inch gravity pipeline that flows down to the city's site. Dedicated meaning that's the only wastewater in that pipe. And this is just a schematic of your main wastewater plant, the flows that it's seeing. Up here in the top left-hand corner is the inputs into your main wastewater plant. And essentially it's your domestic flows, your residents, 3,000 or so connections, and the businesses in town. We're all kind of grouping that into the domestic flows for purposes of our discussion. The flows from Ajinomoto Windsor go through the pretreatment facility, of course, and that gets partially treated before it goes into the main wastewater plant. Another flow stream that we quantified as part of our efforts is there's a bypass line when the flows coming from Ajinomoto Windsor exceed the capacity of the pretreatment. It goes directly to your main wastewater plant untreated through a bypass pipeline. In addition to that, we've got your septic haulers that offload at the wastewater plant. And then last but not least is that dewatered from the solids, dewatering activities that go back into your wastewater plant and gets recycled through. And in the actual plant, I'm going to back up here and kind of talk from the picture. It sometimes makes more sense. Becky, I don't think this thing has a pointer on it, does it? Okay, well, that's fine. The two kind of oblong racetrack-looking structures there at the main wastewater plant are aeration basins. And that's the first process that it goes through. And aeration is a biological process, and the bugs essentially break down the organics in the wastewater, and they break down the strength of the wastewater. And that biological process needs, just like we do, it needs water and air and food. And so as part of the plant design, we've got the food coming in as raw, and we're recycling that solids, and we're adding air to that process. In this case, the city's got these big paddle mixers that stir this thing up as it goes around the racetrack, and it mixes it, and that adds the air to it for the bugs to live. And if those 3 things are not correct in those basins, they won't function properly. And so that's something to pay attention to, and you'll have had some issues with that this year that we've helped the city out with. As your system has reached its capacity, you have to pay even much more attention to those processes. And the 2 little round circular structures there are clarifiers. It's a very simple process. The solids go into that clarifier, and it's meant to be a still pool of water, and it's very deep, and so that the solids effectively settle down to the bottom of it, and the clean water goes over the top of that clarifier. And then it keeps going closer to the creek there. It goes through a UV disinfection process before it outfalls into the creek. And I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of our mission, and Van lives this every day, and that's your discharge permit into Sulphur Creek. The state, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, regulates everything that goes on in this facility. They regulated the design. They regulate the operations of it. Your staff that operate this site have to have a certain class of license depending on the size of the facility, and those licenses are granted to them by the state. And so they have to pass the training, and they have to meet the obligations of the state to obtain and hold that license. Otherwise, they can't operate the wastewater plant. And this permit here is a temporary permit. In this case, this permit was granted in July of 2019, and it expires 5 years from that date. And there's some parameters here that I've outlined in the red. It's the water quality parameters. So effectively, it's the organic matter that's going into the creek has a limit, and your suspended solids that are going into the creek has a limit, and your ammonia and nitrogen, the nutrients that are going into the creek, have a limit. And these things are sampled on a weekly basis, daily basis, and reported to TCEQ on a monthly basis. And if those limits are exceeded, and you exceed those limits, you'll eventually go into enforcement with TCEQ, and they can actually come in and operate the facility for you. And if you're asking for something that exceeds what they think you can meet to protect the water quality, there's a chance that they wouldn't renew this permit. And so we all know that this permit is vital to the city of Lampasas, and this is something that is very important. And let me touch on that a little bit. We have seen instances where the state has the authority to come in and construct the facilities for the city if you are negligent in doing these sorts of things to protect the water quality of the state. They will come in and construct the facilities, take over operations, and hand you a bond that you have to pay off, through your rates or through your tax bonds. So that's the type of authority that the state has. It's not something that happens very often, but it is something we want to keep in the back of our heads. And in talking through our study here, we've had lots of meetings with the city staff. This is a bit of a summary of some of the operational things that we've seen at the plant site over the last year or two, and I think some of these things are becoming a more frequent issue out there. One of those is the grease loading from Ajinomoto Windsor. It's not all the time, but occasionally they do get a big slug of grease coming through the pipelines. That grease clogs up facilities, requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of cleaning, a lot of staff time. And honestly, it's a continual cleaning effort. I think Van's got that gravity pipeline that goes between the plant and your plant on a pretty regular cleaning schedule and jetting to keep the grease out of that pipeline so it doesn't clog up and overflow into the creek. I mentioned the bypass flows. That's due to some hydraulic capacity limits of an on-site lift station that was installed in the 90s. Simply was not built big enough for what you're seeing today. And off-site septic waste challenges, there was a period in 2020 when the city did discontinue acceptance of the septic waste. It was causing a shock load to the plant. The plant was under stress, and it just couldn't handle that additional shock load. We couldn't turn off what was happening in your domestic flows and from Ajinomoto Windsor, so that was really the only valve that we had to work with to turn off and figure things out. We got some things optimized, and I think we resumed accepting that septic waste. But I think it was a pretty good indication of the ceiling, that you're fixing to hit at the wastewater plant. And the sludge belt press that was installed in the 90s, my understanding is this press that dewaters the solids makes it more cost-effective to get rid of them. The parts are not available for it anymore, and when it does go down, the parts have to be manufactured at a facility in Houston, and there's a long lead time on that sometimes. And so anytime that belt press is down and the city's forced to wet haul, what I call the sludge, it's paying to haul off the water is what you're doing, and that's a substantial cost associated with that. And the main wastewater plant, being 22 or 3 years old now in continuous operation, has got some repair needs. There's some gates and some pipelines that need to be cleaned. There's 2 aeration basins that you saw, the 2 racetracks. Right now, they're operating in parallel. Ideally, we'd have the ability to take one of them offline for cleaning. We can't do that right now. The city needs both of them to operate continuously. So there's some things that simply can't be done right now at the main wastewater plant that need to be done. Some photos here that I asked Van to send me. I think the last time we spoke, y'all had asked the city to kind of start taking some pictures. This is what you're seeing at the front end of the pretreatment facility, and grease and water. Grease floats, and when you get the mixing action of the water, it turns into these little grease balls, and that's what you're looking at there. Some of the grease caked up. So. And this is a photo at the end of the process, the clarifier. The photo on the left here is a picture I took a while back, but it's what the clarifier should look like on a normal day, and it's what it looks like most days. The picture on the right here is a picture that Van sent me last week when I asked him if he had any photos, and they had a grease event where they got hit with some grease, and it made it all the way through the process, and that's what it looks like on the surface of that clarifier there. Most of that grease, I'll say, doesn't go into the creek. There's a little ring there as part of this clarifier design that captures the floating stuff, and that little rectangular channel there is intended to capture that floating and it goes back to the front of the process. So it is still providing some protection, but it should be cleaner. And if you guys have got any questions or want to stop me, please do.
Jason, at one point I was reading your report, you made a statement that if something doesn't happen at some point, it's going to, the Ajinomoto plant will impact our citizens' water. But you didn't, I didn't see where you clarified how long that would be. How much time is there before you have to really do something?
It's a good question, very good question. What we're seeing right now is you're already at the limit on paper of what your plant can handle. There's a seasonal variation to that, and so we'll look at it here in a little bit, but there's a seasonal in the summertime whenever the issues are worse. In the wintertime, they're not so bad, like right now. So you've got that to work with. I think you've got a little time. That plant's got some, it's simply the fact that it's only about 30-something% hydraulically loaded. That 1.5 million gallon per day plant is only seeing 500,000 gallons a day or so on an average basis. That's working in your favor right now. So you're meeting permit, but, and each individual home does not have a substantial impact on that plant, but eventually it will catch up to you. I think you're within probably 2 or 3 years at the rate of growth you're seeing, where you're
2 to 3 years?
I would say last time. You've already seen the septic loading. Cutting off the septic haulers would be the first, that's your first avenue of attack, you know, is stopping that load. Anytime you can stop a load on the plant, you're helping make room for your domestic flows.
Okay, thank you.
I believe you're already there in terms of the limit. And so part of what we looked at, the data sets, were just daily operational logs that staff keeps for the last 3 years. In 2019, we put a little temporary rented meter on that bypass pipeline I told you about that logged the flow through that every day. That prior to that had never been done. We had no idea how much flow was going through that bypass meter. And as part of our study, we had rented some composite samplers, and staff helped install those at various locations, actually in Ajinomoto Windsor's plant. We had 3 locations where we installed these composite samplers for about a 2-week period, and we moved them around and in the plant site to try and quantify what that waste stream looks like, because it's very irregular. And so that's a challenge in this effort, is quantifying the waste stream so that we can effectively treat it. We're lucky because the water meter going into the Ajinomoto's plant is an electronic meter. Then we've got the logs of that water meter. Not everything that goes in that plant goes down the drain, but we were able to kind of tell the difference between what goes in and what goes out. And so that gave us a good record for about a 10-year period of what's the operations that are going on inside. And of course, I mentioned meetings, and we've done some record search for some old reports and studies that were initiated in the 90s. And the first thing we had to figure out was how much flow you're getting. I mentioned the bypass flows. That red line here is a representative of total flow. Most of the flow goes through that green line, which is a meter on the lift station, and that's kind of the historical record that we've always been going by, is everything that's pumped through the on-site lift station. We thought, well, that's pretty representative of what Windsor is sending us. And I mentioned in 2019, we put a temporary meter on the bypass line. And what we discovered here is probably another 25% or a third of the flow is going, total flow is going through that bypass line, and you're never quantifying it through the meter. So that really changed the picture on how we were looking at the issue when we were able to quantify that bypass flow. And the blue line is their water meter records, so you can see the difference between what goes in and what goes out in this picture. And that scale here is about, the top scale is about 200,000 gallons per day, I believe. This is more of a historical look. For the past 10-year period, we didn't have the lift station flows going back that far, obviously the bypass flows, but we did have the water meter records. And what this does, it gives us some comfort that there's really not if you were to trend this this annual average water meter record, it really doesn't change that much. But what I noticed in this is the peaks. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've really seen a lot higher peaks in the summertime than what you had been seeing prior to the last 4 or 5 years. Put all this data together, and these are our design recommendations for the pretreatment plant. And this table compares our design recommendations to your existing contract, the pretreatment contract with Ajinomoto Windsor. Just some highlights here. Your average daily flow limit in the contract is 100,000 gallons per day. What you're actually seeing is about 145,000 gallons per day. And the design recommendation is what you're seeing plus another 20%. The 2-hour peak flow, what you're actually seeing is 250 gallons per minute. It's not addressed in the contract, but that lift station's got about 100, 120 gallon per minute capacity. And then, so that's how much water we're getting. What's in the water is in the second table. And the limits that are addressed in the contract are BOD, total suspended solids, ammonium nitrate. FOG stands for fats, oils, and grease. That's the grease. And the pH is not addressed, but it is something that we did test for. The grease level is substantially higher than what's in the contract. And part of this, remind you, is whenever we quantified that bypass flow, we were able to tell you how much you were getting. Prior to that, we only had the meter records from the lift station. So TSS is one of them here. The contract limit is 700 pounds per day. Current condition is about 2,000 pounds per day of solids. And this, Ms. Monroe, this addresses your question about your limits. It's a summary of the biological treatment capacity of this plant and the flow capacity. Your flow here is only about 37% at the main wastewater plant, but your biological limit during that average period with what I'm calling an average plus 1 standard deviation of strength, when you're seeing that, which you don't see it every day, but when you do see that average plus 1 standard deviation of strength coming down that wastewater stream, your plant's seeing more than it can treat. And we're at 112% limit there. Now again, I think your saving grace is those basins are so big that you're able to attenuate that higher load, and you don't have that much water moving through the process. So you may get a peak like that on a 2 or 3 day period, but over that week period, you're still able to effectively treat everything. Okay. And worth noting here, your solids handling facilities are getting pretty close to capacity too. And that belt filter press being at 90% utilized currently, when it does go down, it's pretty tough to catch up on their dewatering. So we've suggested a phased approach to the improvements that we've put together as part of our preliminary design. And in phase 1 here, the 0.80 MGD total capacity, what that represents is discharge capacity at your main plant. Like I said, you're currently at about 550,000 gallons per day. And with these phase 1 improvements, that'll allow you to treat up to 0.8 MGD. So that represents about a 30 to 40% growth in your city if we were to implement these phase 1 improvements. And first one on the list, I think one of the most important is the grease interceptors to capture that grease before it gets to your process on site at Ajinomoto Windsor. Then of course there's some pretreatment headworks, septic receiving stations. Our recommendation is to combine your septic loads in with this pretreatment basin so that you're not shocking your plant when you're offloading that, and we get some treatment of the septic haulers before they hit the main process. And a new clarifier and expansion of the aeration basins, and a new belt press building. Phase 2 would get you to 1.15 MGD at your main wastewater plant. That represents more than doubling of the city. Phase 3, I thought is worth mentioning, although we didn't look at this, to get to the total 1.5 MGD of treatment capacity at the main plant. That plant, when it was designed in the 90s, it was designed for lower strength of domestic flows than what you're currently seeing. With today's water savings devices, your strength coming from your residences are higher. They're about 50% higher than they were in the 80s, you know, when this plant was actually designed. So you were seeing 200 pounds per day BOD per home. When this plant was designed, you're currently seeing closer to 300 pounds per day BOD. So that limits your capacity to treat flows at the main wastewater plant. So beyond this 1.15 MGD, really you would be looking at additional aeration capacity at the main wastewater plant. That's pretty far out in the future, though. And that's assuming that Ajinomoto Windsor is still using the pretreatment aeration. There's nothing that says if they weren't utilizing everything you would have built, that you couldn't use that for your domestic flows too at some day in the future. So that's an important reason to maintain ownership of these facilities. They could be used for other purposes. This is a kind of a little snapshot of our site layout. And the message here is everything that we've suggested that needs to be built can be built on the land that you hold. And so there's not a major land acquisition or permitting or buffer zones, that side of thing, which is good news. That's greatly would speed up the process of doing anything that you need to do.
Is there a disruption to any of the current activity in order to facilitate this construction?
No, this is set up so that you can maintain your current operations while the new facilities are being built. So the idea would be to build the new facilities and then put them into operation and take the old pretreatment basin offline to redo it.
How long would it take for the for Angimoto to put the grease interceptors in? Like if they did that, then would that buy us any time to construct this?
I think the main issue there is land and room right now. Their existing grease traps are under the building inside their facility. Ideally, they would be in a location outside where the city could also access them and check them. And so I think that would require some land acquisition. Frame of reference for time to construct, I think it's not long. That's a very easy, it's like putting in a septic tank, basically. You know, it's not a huge undertaking. And here's a engineer's cost estimate for what we talked about. I apologize, the numbers here are a little small to read. I've got another side that summarizes it where you might be able to read it better. But the message here that I wanted to get across is because there's recommended shared capacity in the pretreatment basins, and you've already got a shared capacity that they're using in the solids handling facilities, albeit I don't think that's really addressed in the contract. We've split this up. And the different share categories are based on the hydraulic loading that you would have from your septic haulers versus their loads, and the organic loading that you would have from the septic haulers versus their loads. The numbers there, the city share of the hydraulic would be 5%, and the organics is 12%. And then the organic loading of the solids handling facilities, because you're taking everything in your main wastewater plant and pushing it through those solids handling facilities, the city share is 44%, and theirs is about 56%. And so that was our recommendations on sharing in the cost of these. And here's a quick summary, the breakdown of the phase 1, phase 2, and total cost. When you put it all together, the city share is about 18.5% of the phase 1 improvements, with the total cost for phase 1 of about $8.56 million.
And if you say that real fast, it doesn't sound so bad, right?
That's right. Yes. These costs have really gone up in the last 5 years, you know, with the demand for these types of facilities in Central Texas. It's and the equipment that goes along with it and the contractors it takes to build these things. We're really seeing an escalation of construction costs. So if we were to revisit this a year from now, I think we would warrant updating these costs. They may already be out of date.
I don't think we're in a position to wait for a year before we take measures to start moving forward on this. And I think council and staff has been in agreement on that for quite some time. We know what the problem is. Having the breakdown of whose responsibility and who's, culpable for what issues is what we've been desperately needing, so.
Has this been addressed with Ajinomoto yet?
That's a staff question.
Ajinomoto did have an initial briefing once we got the draft from Jones Heroy, and we will be doing the same presentation to them here as soon as possible.
I think it's important to note that they did pay for half of our study. I believe it was a portion, at least, of our study. And so they had been involved through the process, and they knew what we were doing. I'll take a brief moment just to talk about some things I think that need to be done immediately. And the existing grease traps can be effective if they're properly cleaned and maintained. Our recommendation is to clean those out when they reach 25% of capacity. The problem is I don't think anybody's really checking to see how full they are. The grease trap gets full of grease. It's grease in, grease out. It doesn't do anything. So that's something that can be done fairly quickly and easily. Another one, these next two are important for design. I think this needs to be done as soon as we can, is install more of a permanent flow measuring device so we can capture what's going through the bypass and the lift station at the same time, and a permanent composite sampling station on their effluent pipeline. The value of that would be for design, but it'd also be for enforcing their permit. If you were to enforce any sort of surcharges on the pretreatment permit, you need to be able to defend that, and these types of composite samplers would be what you need to be able to defend that. And then, of course, I think we've still got some work to do to optimize your existing wastewater plant process. We've been in discussions with Van about that, and there's still some things he's trying to get a handle on. I think there's some more opportunity there to make the plant run a little more efficiently, because I do think you're going to need it this summer. And that's all I've got.
Council, have any questions for Jason? Do we have comments for staff? I think council's aware of the issue and the magnitude of it. I think council is also aware that we have staff competent to do whatever is necessary. However, if funding to do those things needs to be addressed, we'd like to do that quickly. So.
Very good. This item we had planned to roll out during our planning session. After that was postponed, we decided to go ahead and see if Jason could attend a workshop session and roll it out at this time. So we will move forward.
You need anything from council prior to meeting with Windsor?
No.
Do you need council in attendance to meet with Windsor?
If you'd like to, sure, that would be helpful.
Just let me know.
You bet.
Anything else on this item? Moving on to the next item, discussion regarding comprehensive plan status, priorities, and implementation.
Mayor and Council, this is also something that we had intended to review in December for the planning session at that time, but it was postponed, obviously, and we wanted just to touch base with you about the current status. As we've reported previously, we have received the draft Chapter 5 and 6. 5 we've already reviewed somewhat extensively. However, we have not reviewed the narrative that was then included on some of the goal statements. You have a copy of this in your packet. Chapter 5, I think, still needs a fair amount of review. I had hoped for maybe a little more specific action steps, and I think that is something that we will probably add as reference, not necessarily included in this document, but almost as a supplement. That would be an easy score sheet. And then the Chapter 6 is taking those objectives and then trying to put together a timeline. What's most important? What's maybe not most important, but what's the low-hanging fruit? what can we do in the 3 to 5 year range, what is maybe beyond that particular time. But we would like to give you the opportunity to look at this. We've also delivered this, I believe, to staff. We will be taking it to Planning Commission as well. It is our intent, or at least our thought, to put this on the agenda for February 8th for any additional input or discussion. We are looking at probably getting with CPAC in that kind of small group setting that we did previously in February, and then coming maybe February 22nd, having a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and Council to review where we are. I'd be happy to answer any questions or take your comments or any direction you have, but we'll try to get this wrapped up by March.
Any comments or question from council? Thank you, Finley. Item number 4, discussion and updates regarding the City of Lampasas Public Safety Communications System equipment.
Mayor, Council, I did a brief overview for the new council members of what has been budgeted. You'll see that in 2017, the Central Texas Council of Governments did a communications interoperability assessment. We knew before the assessment that we were having some issues and needed to upgrade our radio system. And so it has reached the end of life. Our radio coverage is inadequate in some areas, not all areas, but in some areas. We have some difficulties, as we expressed before. We have to use a handset to talk to part of the Sheriff's Department, and we're not able to talk to the other area of the Sheriff's Department. Fire Department, we can hear them inside the city, but we can't hear them in places outside of the city. Our system's obsolete, and we also don't have a maintenance contract because of that, so we have to wait long periods of time before they can come and provide maintenance to it. So currently, our conventional analog is moving to, our primary radios are moving to a digital trunking with a backup system of an analog digital. Going from the old landline phone to the new cell phones is what it's like. Thank you. Thank you. So our project cost, we were able to bring it down to $663,371.95. And then we were able to, the Central Texas Council of Governments was able to provide us with a state emergency radio infrastructure grant for $253,949.68. And this was a cooperative effort with Central Texas Council of Government and the Emergency Management Coordinator, Angela Rainwater. So where we're at with our progress, 11/17 of 2020, Jesse Henage, that is the Central Texas Council of Government's Emergency Service Program Manager, provided purchase order for the grant to the vendor, Bearcom. At the same time, the City of Lampasas provided us with 2 purchase orders that we provided to the vendor to purchase the rest of the equipment. So currently, we have purchase orders for the full amount of the radio equipment. On 11/20, I spoke with the vendor, Gene Eicher, and he advised that the equipment was configured and updated and it was being ordered. And we established a time of the equipment to be delivered during the month of January. Currently, the equipment is being staged. All the large equipment's in. There's a few pieces that have not come in yet. We'll implement our planning early part of February, so we should meet again pretty soon to put it all, lay it all out exactly how we're going to do this project. It's going to be a very fast project once it starts so that fire department, police department aren't without radios. The very first thing that will be replaced is a repeater, and then from there they will replace our mobiles and our portables, our subscribers. We'll stage our units at the fire department to have those radios removed, the old radios removed, and the new radios put in. Bearcom will replace as many radios per day as they can. And then we'll coordinate our console, where they'll change out our dispatch console. Kelly Sanguinet, our records and communication supervisor, and I are currently working on updating any interagency agreements that we have with other agencies and with some that we don't have, such as TxDOT, so that we can communicate back and forth on the radio with them. Bearcom is going to conduct a train the trainer class, and then we'll have training materials also that we'll be providing. And you see Officer Josh Watson back here. He is great with things like this, so he will be training other officers. He will be probably one of the trainers for that. We want to thank you very much for understanding our needs and providing us with the funding for this project. You can only apply Band-Aid so many times before it stops sticking, and that's where we were at with this. Any questions?
Sounds exciting, though.
It is, it is. We will be state of the art once we get all this in. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the update. Next item is discussion regarding possible amendments to City of Lampasas employee personnel policy.
Mayor and Council, I'm sorry if I feel like I'm kind of piling it on you tonight. I know we're short in numbers, but our intent was, as we put this agenda together, was to try to do a little catch-up and get started on some things that we knew that we had talked about previously and was on Council's list of priorities, this being one of them. And I think the discussion previously was, rather than bring you an entire document in one fell swoop, we would take smaller bites out of the personnel policy. To that end, in somewhat a very arbitrary way, Yvonne and Vicki and I sat down and said, what are the 3 or 4 things that we can bullet and go ahead and get a start on? And those items were the certification pay, longevity pay, introductory period for transfer employees or employees that are promoted, and the use of sick time to supplement workers' compensation payments. And certainly we do not want to discount any priorities that council may have. If there's a different direction you want us to go, again, we wanted to use this just simply as a starting point. The goal of this workshop agenda item will be, would you like us to go ahead and formalize some of these amendments and bring them back to you for formal consideration, or would you like us to work on other items as well, or other priorities that you might have? Just very briefly on certification pay, it's a somewhat disjointed policy section, and we'd just simply like to develop a more inclusive policy that we could utilize for all employees in all departments. We also want to take a look at the particular incentives and make sure that there's some equity within other departments, and there's some consideration for the complexity of the skill, and then also what the value is to the city. Longevity pay, and this is something that actually Councilman Goodert brought up, and it was to extend the current longevity payments for folks that are here for 25 years or more, or 30 years. Basically have 2 more steps for those employees that are tenured 25 years as well as 30 years. Currently we have, I believe it's 2 or 3 at 30 years, Van and Flint and Chief Bailey, correct. So there are about 7 employees with over 25 years of tenure with the city, and so this was an item that would be a relatively easy amendment to make. The introductory period, which is also interchangeable with probationary period. Frankly, I don't think it's a very well-written section of our policy, and I think the primary distinction that we would want to address was the difference between an employee that's promoted into another position and versus a brand new employee. And the case or the example that I will cite you, we had an employee that actually was promoted at one time and received a slight bump in their pay, and then while they were still in their new introductory period, a COLA was granted by council, but because they were in their introductory period, they actually were being paid less than they would have if they'd stayed in their normal position. So it's something that we solved a different way, but that's what we want to try to do is clarify it, rewrite that section, and make that distinction between a a current employee that's being transferred or promoted versus a brand-new employee. And then the final thing was just the on-the-job injuries compensation section. And currently our policy reads that, workers' comp will pay between 70 and 80%, and I don't know through some sort of magic formula that Yvonne says they come up with, but it's not what you would take home. And, for somebody like Reese A. Strike, that got hit by a car out on the scene, it's almost like, you're being penalized. So we want to make sure that is specifically addresses the ability to use sick time or vacation time to make up that difference. But that is just a very quick rundown of the 4 different items that we kind of pulled out of the air as a starting point. We'd certainly be interested in what if council would like us to go ahead and formalize this for consideration, or if there are other items you'd like us to consider as well. I know you don't necessarily go home and read the personnel policies and guidelines at home, but these are the things that we came up with. Yvonne, do you have?
To do this work, you're still meeting within a committee of staff members collectively?
I grabbed Vicki and Yvonne basically at this point and
Okay.
sat down, so.
Okay.
I mean, I would be comfortable with you formalizing. I had a question on the longevity pay. Are you going to come up with that amount, or, because, it stops on here with the 20 years or more receive the $850. So are y'all going to, as staff, come up with that step amount?
It appears that there's about a $150 difference between the 5-year increments.
I think you say 1,000 at 25 years and 1,200 at 30 years. I
Right.
think it makes it easy.
I don't know, Councilman Goodard, if
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I'd like to see the probation period done away for the employee. Just have a probation period for the new employees. Either that or have it reworded to where the termination part.
Bob, can you be sure you speak into your microphone? We're not hearing you at all.
Yeah. Or either that or have it to where the termination period comes off of it.
so. What I think staff is hearing from Councilman Goodard is that pretty much leave the introductory period just for new employees and don't have a reference to current employees.
Yes.
I don't have an issue with that.
I guess I would probably have an issue with that, in that if you've promoted someone and you're expecting them to come up to speed, I do think you would need a probationary period. I don't think you need to penalize them with COLA raises or anything like that. I'm just not seeing that you need to do away with a probationary period for a newly promoted employee.
Yeah, and the other intent and hopefully byproduct of this type of policy is that you provide the employee and the supervisor the opportunity to communicate about the performance of the job and the departmental goals and that sort of thing. So maybe I'll draft something that would certainly meet that intent even for transferred employees, but not penalize them.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get across is it states right here, for performance and extended, the employee should be terminated if they can't qualify. And I think that needs to be taken away from the employee that's actually here. Should just be new employee.
The whole part should be just new employees, in your opinion?
No, we can go with a probation period for a sitting employee, but the termination where it says the person could be terminated, I think should come off a sitting employee when they get promoted or transferred. Like I'm going to use Becky for example. She shouldn't have to go where it says terminated. She could do the probation, but there should be no termination. Yeah, in the policy it states right here.
Yeah, no, I'm reading where it says, or if the employee should be terminated.
Yeah, that terminated should be taken off, other than for a new employee. It should be a separate probation clause, I guess I would say, for a new employee. That word terminated shouldn't even be in there for a sitting employee.
Why,
So you can be
I ask
terminated in a new position if you are incompetent in that position that you've applied for, been promoted to, and are ineffective in that
I know that,
position.
Mayor, but most of them positions are appointed either by council, like Becky, for example, or if somebody in one of the other departments has moved up, they want to move somebody up in that department and hire on the bottom. and they shouldn't have to worry about that. If that person that's saying, hey, put in position for that position, he should feel that he's gonna make it. But that employee, the word says terminated, lingers over employees' heads.
And
All employees should have the word terminated lingering over their head because that's a motivation to do your job. I don't know why we would remove the ability to terminate an employee during a,
I think, and certainly, you know, Texas is a very strong at-will state, so you can terminate for cause or terminate, you know, for no cause. But I think the intent of it, I think what I'm hearing is that we want to really reinforce the communication between supervisor and employee, as well as, you know, the ongoing feedback.
I am in agreement that we don't want any policy in place that has a negative impact on an employee that is transferred between positions or promoted between positions in the event of a COLA or other things. But all other factors need to remain in place.
And I did have one comment about on the job injuries. And bear in mind, I'm from the private sector, and so
Yes.
this statement that says you'll allow accrual of vacation and sick while they're out,
Yes.
that seems unheard of for me. Is that something that the city
The
does?
reason, well, no, the reason that we did that is because if we are sick otherwise, your accrual doesn't stop. If I go on vacation otherwise, my accrual doesn't stop.
And I've always had that it stopped. If you're out for 4 hours, you don't accrue any vacation or sick. So maybe that's just the difference between government and private, I guess. Do you accrue vacation and sick?
With the various clients that I have, they all have different policies. Some pay 100% of the difference between comp and what you're supposed to be paying. Some allow you to accrue, some allow no accrual. I mean, it's really dependent upon, each one has a different policy. I don't have anybody with mirroring policies.
I was just curious.
Sure. Certainly, if there are other items that council would like us to put on the list for next go-round, we'll do that, but we will prepare these for your consideration.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Item number 6, discussion and updates related to COVID-19.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bringing the information to you that we have currently, and I just got a text during this. I don't know if you've checked your phone yet or not, Mayor, but we'll get to that better news. The state of Texas currently has an estimated 381,595 active cases. Right now, our fatalities in Texas stand at 34,322. As we were sitting here, I got the information, the update. Lampasas County now has a total of 1,404 total cases. Our active cases is now down to 119. As of last Friday, we were actually at 142. That was an all-time record for us. So we did drop from over the weekend. Sad news, I was also made aware that we just had another fatality reported that goes for the county of Lampasas. So we're now at 17. If you look on the DSHS website, you'll see that they have 19 fatalities listed for us. I do not know what the response was. I asked Dr. Hay if she had any explanation for that, and I have not seen that update. So we're trying to figure that out. But 17, and that's as of today. We have 8 that are currently in the hospital. We reported some time ago when we stepped back to 50% occupancy. What I wanted to do was bring a little information on that number there. That number is based off of the amount of COVID patients that we have in the hospital in our trauma area service. When you look at that right there, we're going to have to be below 15% for a period of 7 days, or we're going to have 30 active cases or less in our county. And the reason I bring that up, it's not just so that our businesses can go up to 75%, but that also affects whether or not we're going to have elective surgeries. Okay, a lot of people gloss over that and they think it's all about the amount of businesses that we can have or the amount of people that we can have inside of a meeting or anything like that. And I tend to think of that because I'm signing all these papers daily to send to the mayor for approval. It's not just a matter of how many people we can have at a birthday party or a baby shower or inside of a business. It's also elective surgeries. And elective surgeries is not just what you would think of as far as, well, I want to have a nose job or something like that. If you tear your knee and you need to have surgery on your knee, that would be put off. That's considered an elective surgery. So here again, a little bit of reason why we need to maybe refocus and be a little bit more attentive to the amount of cases that we have, not just here in Lampasas, but in our local area. As far as vaccination news, the state of Texas is currently utilizing the vaccine hubs to administer vaccinations. I heard on the news today that they are getting another 300,000 vaccinations this week. Of that 200,000 and something, I think 230,000 are spoken for as far as that will be the second in a series of vaccines. So that leaves us 100,000. If you look at the big picture of that, the new president has said that he wants to give 1 million immunizations each day for the 100 days. He wants 1 million each day for 100 days, and that's across the nation. So that really is a lot of vaccines for the state of Texas to get and to administer and to push out. And I think that if you check all the numbers and everything, Texas is leading the way as far as vaccines. We may not be seeing that here in Lampasas County, and unfortunately I don't have any real news to offer up as far as where you can go and get your vaccine here in Lampasas County. I am working with Angela Rainwater, the county's emergency management coordinator. We're working with our representative from the Division of Emergency Management of the state of Texas. We're trying to get some type of a vaccination hub to where we can do that here. I've spoken with the city manager. He assures me that we have the support of the city in trying to do that. And this would be for anybody in Lampasas County. I don't know what the number would be, and right now we don't even have a date as far as when that would be, but we are trying to work on that and get that taken care of. Unfortunately, at this time, the only information I can really give you is probably the same information that I gave you in an email a couple of weeks ago when we got an email from a concerned citizen wanting to know what we could do. Contact your primary care physician. Never has that been more important now than, in the past. If you have a primary care physician, contact them, let them know, hey, I need this. What can I do to get on this? Especially if you fall into the 1A or the 1B group, if you're over 65, if you have these pre-existing conditions. See what information they can give you for that. I think that Burnett County is getting ramped up to have one of these vaccination pods. I don't know how you get into that other than contacting Burnett County, going online or getting in touch with their public health down there. But if you can do things proactively, that may help speed you through the process of getting that type of information to them and them getting a response back to you. I know that it's almost, you hate to say that it's like these pop-up stores that were the trend over the last few years in Austin and Dallas and like that, but they are doing that in larger counties just as far as, hey, we're going to be in the southeastern part of the county today, and we're going to hopefully give out 15,000 immunizations. We obviously can't do anything like that on the scale in Lampasas, but some of the larger Bell counties and getting into Williamson County, you may get to be a part of that and get kind of in that, and that may be the quickest way to do that, but we are making every effort that we can at this time to do something here in Lampasas County. I apologize that I don't have any information at this time as far as that goes, but that really is all that I have for you. Do y'all have any other questions on anything that we've talked about before tonight or tonight? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Item number 7, discussion regarding any item on the regular agenda. Does anyone wish to discuss anything we'll take up later this evening? Do I have a motion to adjourn into executive session?
So moved.
Second?
A motion is second. The City Council of the City of Lampasas, Texas will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551 as follows. Section 551.087, Economic Development. 1, to receive and evaluate financial information received from a business prospect, to discuss same and or to deliberate regarding commercial or financial information that the city has received from a business prospect that the city seeks to have stay, locate, or expand in or near the city with which the city is conducting economic development negotiations, and or 2, deliberate an offer of any financial or other incentives to any business prospect described as above.
Mayor and council, I'd ask the Assistant City Manager join us.
We now reconvene in a special session. Discussion and possible action concerning items posted and discussed by City Council in executive session. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, I'll make a motion to direct the city manager to finalize and execute development agreements for Hillside Acres and Hidden Oaks subdivision within the parameters discussed in the executive session.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Questions or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. I have a motion to adjourn special session.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 We'll take a 10-minute recess. We're going to go ahead and call to order the regular session of governing body of City of Lampasas. This time, if you would all please rise. Chief Bailey, if you don't mind leading us in invocation.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the beautiful and glorious day that you've given us today. Father, so many people are suffering and ill. We ask that you end this virus. Father, watch over our meeting tonight and guide us and direct us as your will. Please make sure, Father, that all have a safe journey home. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Under presentations and proclamations this evening, we do have a presentation of some longevity certificates.
Mayor, we do is we're trying to get in the routine of recognizing those employees that meet their 5-year increment in terms of tenure. Ricky Haney can't join us tonight, but Josh Watson is with us, who's was talked about a little bit earlier related to the radio project that Chief Bailey is working on. And with that, I'd like to have Josh come up, and Sammy as well.
Thank you, Josh. Moving on to public hearing and citizens' comments. Item 1.1, citizens' comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter not included on the agenda may do so at this time. The city council may not deliberate on items presented under this agenda item. While those of you in attendance decide if you want to talk, I will go ahead and give the phone number for those watching from home. It's 512-556-0332. Do we have anyone who wishes to address the council on a matter not included on the agenda? Item 1.2, citizens' comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter that is included on the agenda may do so at this time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak about an item that is included on the agenda this evening? Moving on to minutes. 2.1, discussion and possible action concerning approval of minutes of the regular meeting on January 11th, 2021.
I didn't notice any errors. I'd move to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 In the effort of approval, so we have a majority, I will say aye. However, I was not present. I will rely upon the presentation of the minutes from staff and council to be accurate. 3.0 consent agenda. 3.1, discussion and possible action regarding the second reading of an ordinance to approve, deny, or approve with modifications a request to rezone property described as lots 1R and 2R, Block 26 of the Old Town Addition, Lampasas County, generally located at 907 East 3rd Street, from Light Industrial LI to two-family residential district duplex 2F.
Recommend approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. 4.0, boards and department reports. Up this evening is Miss Yvonne, who says she doesn't have a really long one.
And I do not.
I do not.
The exciting report for utilities and finance. We're not real exciting, but we do work pretty hard. Just to briefly go over our departments, meter reading, I have 2 full-time employees there. Tom's been with us for a little over 10 years and Junior 8 years. They do a great job. They read, take care of minor repairs. They do all of our door tags, our disconnects, customer service. If they have a leak, they'll go out and talk to the customer. I can pick up the phone and call them, and they'll do whatever I ask them to do. So really appreciate them. They are the revenue for the city of Lampasas, most of it. They have to read those meters correctly so that we can bill correctly. So they're very, very important part of our department. Moving on to utilities, I've got 4 full-time staff, 1 part-time staff. Lupe Charping's been with us for 13 years, Felicia Vallejo 8, Mary Garcia 3, and Pam Torres 1 year. Pam started the day that we shut the doors at City Hall for COVID. So her first 3-4 months was working the window. It was kind of where she learned all of her stuff at. The girls do a lot of work. Lupe does a lot of utility payments, answers a lot of phone calls, does our AR billing, bank recs, just a myriad of different things that she's learned over the years. She's been able to pick up and help in the utility department. Felicia does all of our billing. We have 3 different cycles plus supplementals every month. We did move her into her own office this last summer so she could focus more on bills and not get interrupted with customers, and that has really helped her a lot, and but they did put us down a utility clerk. So I do appreciate y'all approving us for a part-time utility clerk during budget. We did have one that we hired, did not work out, so we are out for advertisement again on our part-time. Mary basically takes care of the back of the utility department. She does the drive-through, the filing, things of that nature. Pam Torres, like I said, she's learned how to do utilities, connects. During COVID, when we were shut down, we had to do all of our connects, everything at the window. So we learned, can you go fill it out in the parking lot? Can you come back around? When you're done with that, can you come back around one more time? We finally got a system in place, but it took a little while to get there. I appreciate all the work they do in utilities, and pretty much whatever I ask them to do, they're more than willing to help out and do whatever they need to do. Finance, there's 2 of us, me and Bessie. Bessie supervises the utility department. She processes utility payments when we need to. She does all the accounts payables, payroll, longevity payments, monthly reports, helps me during audit, budget, things of that nature. I just want to emphasize that we really take care of people. We take care of customers, we take care of employees with payroll. That is really what our main goal is, to make sure everybody's taken care of. And I appreciate all the work that they do. And if y'all have any questions, let me know. Good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Yvonne. Moving on to 5.1, city manager's operational report.
Just a couple of quick items, Mayor and Council. WCID met again on January 19th, and I know I've told you this about every time they meet. They talk about how they're going to pay for the match for the high hazard upgrade for dam number 6. You do have a little bit more of a formal letter within your packet that outlines that need. I think it's still probably in the best interest of the city to work that through the CIP. It is already on the CIP schedule, and then maybe take it up in budget time here in the next couple of months. Campbell Park, just a brief update on skate park, pavilion. We have talked with Langham and Foster regarding doing a geotechnical. The steps that we have to, to get to a contract, you have to back probably 5 or 6 steps up from bringing City Council a contract for you to approve. One of those things, we've got to identify the space, so CCC Surveying is working on that within the needs of the skate park contractor as well as the pavilion contractor. Once that's identified, we'll give those site surveys back to the contractor and Langham and Foster and say, okay, where is the best place for these borings? And once we do that, then we can get the borings done, and then they can design a slab so that you can figure out how much it's going to cost you to build a pavilion and a skate park. Our concern is that in the previous geotechnical work that's been done at Campbell Park, they couldn't hit bedrock, 30, 40 feet. So there may be some increases, cost increases as a result of the foundation that they will have to build on both of those structures. Anyway, we are making progress, and we do want to include stakeholders in the next phase of our planning. An update, as of the publication of my memo, we'd only had 1 filing and no packets picked up. We've actually had 2 more packets picked up, but neither of those 2 individuals have brought their packets back, but we will continue to get the word out. Staff anniversaries, in addition to Josh Watson and Ricky Haney at 5 years each, have some very tenured employees. Van Berry this month, 33 years ago, joined the city workforce. Ramon Cañada, 23 years. Emily Stone, 8. John Wilkes, 3 years. Frank Ellett, 2 years. We're also welcoming back Colt Despain, who's come back to work with us. He was previously in our park department, and he's now back with the wastewater department. And then last meeting, you met Dylan when he was sworn in as a new peace officer. Hostess House, staff will be getting together next week to take a look at the MEP comments from Hendricks. He has given us his initial comments. We'll respond, and we'll probably also try to get with Antonio with Reliant Architecture. He's the architect that did the wastewater shop, to see what sort of input he has. We would like to deliver an actionable report to you probably no later than March about the next steps. Auditors, they are done and complete with their on-site work. We do anticipate the delivery of an audit sometime March. Oh, I thought they were done and gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Finley. Item 5.2, Mayor's comments. Just to reiterate something Finley was discussing about packets being available. If there's anyone who's considering running for City Council and has questions, I will make myself available to you to give you as much information as you might need before you decide to embark on this glorious journey. 6.0, unfinished business, we don't have any. 7.0, new business. 7.1, discussion of possible action regarding a contract services agreement between Lampasas County and the City of Lampasas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, this is the same contract services that we've done every year with the county, where we share cost with them with regarding to the school. And this just identifies our polling places, our clerks, and then it's going to show us when we do our voting, the week that we do our voting, and the locations as well. And then it identifies the cost that we're going to do, which was like $5,200, and we've actually budgeted $6,000. And there is going to be an exhibit in there that's not included, that is the agreement with the school that was approved on January 11th, and that'll be included in this contract as well.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item 7.2, discuss and consider a request of the use of joint use facilities funds for Central Texas Water Corporation plant upgrade.
This is for a major maintenance item at the old water plant at Central Texas. That's a water plant that serves the city of Lampasas, that actually draws our water and treats our water before it's delivered through Kempner. We're responsible generally for a portion of that maintenance. This was a rather extensive upgrade to the replacement of actuators, as well as some repair to the clarifiers. The amount that was to be included is $170,000. Our share would be $57,000, and that is what Kempner is requesting to be used out of the Joint Use Facilities Fund. That is a fund that was set up, gosh, back in 2005, 2006. It was basically set up from the proceeds of the refinance of those facilities, as well as where we were required in some cases to carry a reserve equal to a certain amount of the principal balance. We had excess funds, so we put that at the time the contract was executed into a joint use facilities fund. There's currently about $750,000 in that account.
I have a motion from council.
Motion to use the joint fund to pay for that $57,000.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item 7.3, discuss and consider a resolution by the City Council nominating a candidate for election to the Board of Directors of Central Texas Water Supply Corporation. Finley DeGraff and Reed.
Second?
I can't make that motion.
No.
I have a motion from council.
I recommend Finley DeGraff and Reed.
And I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye. It's unanimous. You're welcome. 7.4, discussion and possible action regarding the ratification of expenditure for bathrooms for the street and electric department building in the total amount of $35,750.
Mayor and council, yes, these bathrooms have been completed and they're very nice. The guys, can't thank you enough. It's warm, going to be cool. It's got a shower, it's got storage. It's really nice. They couldn't tell you how much they appreciate it.
We couldn't get pictures?
Huh?
You couldn't give us pictures?
Oh, I should have. But on that, my recommendation is to approve the ratification of the expense of $35,750. We had budgeted like 16, and then it went up to around 20, and y'all can see the bids we got. Lois and Bobby Sanford did the job at $35,750, so I'm asking a motion to approve that.
Recommend approval.
Second. But I did wonder why you didn't come back and ask us for the 37, the 35.
The $35,750. Tell you the truth, we thought we had put more in there till the bill came in and we got the research, and it was kind of my fault. Just, we thought we had allotted more money. We thought we had like 20-something thousand. And when the new budget come out, it wasn't there. Where we got lost, I don't know.
I mean, I find zero argument in providing a decent facility for
It is
our incredibly hard workers
Yes.
to go to the bathroom.
And it was miserable in those things. Miserable. If y'all get a chance, go look at them.
I do have a motion and a second. Any more questions or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank
It
you
is
very much.
unanimous. Thank you. 7.5, discuss and consider acceptance of the 2019-2020 year-end financial report.
That's a year-end unaudited. I know council sat through a riveting report on finances last. Mike? And has been our practice. What we'll do is typically present one meeting and then come back at the following meeting in case there are any questions, and ask for your acknowledgement of the report.
I'll make a motion to acknowledge the receipt of the 2020 financial report.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 It is unanimous. 7.6, discussion of possible action concerning the first reading of an ordinance calling for a general election to be held May 1st, 2021.
Motion to approve the first reading.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I think Bob
So
wants
moved.
this. Bob hasn't made one all night. Bob, you want to make the motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I make a motion to adjourn, I guess.
Do I have a second? Second from Ms. Monroe. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Have a good evening.